What's going on, everybody? This is your boy Armando X, and I have the lovely, legendary DJ Celeste in the building with me right now. DJ Celeste, please just tell the people who you are.
Hmm. Thank you, Armando, and I'm honored to be here. My name is DJ Celeste Alexander,
Mm,
and um, I'm from Chicago,
mm.
and I am one of house music's first female DJs, mix artist.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing. Amazing.
1981, 82. First of all, I met Steve. We were both in college, um,
Mm,
junior college. We both went to city colleges in Chicago. We went to a school that's called it's
Columbia College?
it's called Harold Washington
Mm,
College, but Chicago has a large community college based system. It was called Loop Junior College, and basically Loop is because the Loop in Chicago language, the Loop is downtown,
mm.
and it was downtown. So we went to Loop Junior College together. Um, I did not know Steve prior to that. I met him in college. Actually, I kind of stalked him in college because because I had the biggest crush on Steve. I just really did. We had to been about maybe 19 years old, 18 or 19 years old.
Mhm.
And eventually struck up a friendship with him, where we would sit and we would talk during our off periods. In the lunchroom. That was our like our community gathering circle in the
Mm.
old building, and I had a student aid type of job where
Mm.
it was like work study. I had a work study job, and my work study job was actually in the cafeteria. So I worked in that cafeteria, and Steve would come to the cafeteria and have his lunch, and I'd
You,
kind of
you be hooking them up. You be giving them extra apples and sandwiches and stuff.
funny because I don't know if Steve actually remembers this, and why I still remember this myself is crazy.
Mm.
But Steve would always order the same thing. He always wanted a grilled ham and cheese sandwich.
Oh
And
wow.
um, I would make sure that his sandwich was ample, put it that way.
Mhm. You
So
it sounds like the most deaf like Alicia Keys. You don't know my name, where he's always ordering
yeah.
the
So
fried fish with the hot chocolate.
yeah, we struck up a friendship, and we would sit and we would talk, and Steve had this real crazy sense of humor. He was kind of like, are you familiar with Weird Al Yankovic?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Steve was kind of like that. He could put his own words to songs that was out, and he would just sit up and just, you know, rattle off his own words to popular songs, right?
Wow.
And of course, me having a crush and, everything he did was cute to me. So, I'm just laughing and giggling, and th- our conversations were always revolved or involved with music of some sort or another. And he
Mhm.
would always talk about hot mixing, you know, hot mixing. That's what it was called back then.
Mhm.
Um, and I got intrigued by that. I've always been into music myself, and I've
Mhm.
always, I guess, kind of gravitated towards the DJ culture.
Mhm.
Can remember in my early teens, preteens. I worked for a radio station. I didn't work for them, but I used to just go to this radio station that was on campus for the University of Chicago called WHBK.
Wow.
And one of my mother's friends had a show on WHBK that he did on Sundays, and it was like a Dusty's Steppers show.
Mhm.
Um, you being from Jersey, I'm not
Nah,
sure.
nah. I know a little thing or two about stepping. Um,
Okay.
but what I know from stepping was based off of, I ain't gonna say his name, but that song that came out when I was a kid. And then I found out about the
Okay.
whole culture of stepping was an actual thing. I
It
didn't,
is.
you
And it
know.
always has been in Chicago. It's a real big urban thing.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, a Black urban thing in Chicago. I would say my parents, they didn't call it stepping, they called it the bop, which I'm quite sure they did in a whole bunch of other different, like chocolate cities, but they probably had different names from it.
I
But
understand.
it evolved into stepping probably with my generation. So
Wow.
he would, so I started volunteering at WHBK for my mother's friend's show. I would
Yeah.
just go up there, and I was called, at the time they would call it a record girl. So he was the on air personality, and it was a
Hmm.
campus show. Um, so they'd have to run PSAs, the public service announcements. They have a huge library of records, so I was a record girl. So he would pull the records, and I'd have to be responsible to put them back in the jackets and put them back in the library after he played them for his show. So they were live, they were playing live records there. And
Hmm.
then he got me at the time, in order to do PSAs, in order to play PSAs, which were on, this is funny as hell. The PSAs were recorded on 8 tracks,
Wow.
8 tape. So, or on a reel to reel. So in order to lead into or have your voice capitulated over the air, you had to have an FCC license. And they came in classes. So you had a first class, a second class, a third class. Um,
Wow.
and you had to be of a certain age in order to get that license. But in order for me to do the PSAs, I don't know how he did. He petitioned with the University of Chicago and somehow got me my third class FCC license, which allowed me to do PSAs on the air for him. So I was always kind of attracted to the
Wow.
the playing of music, and just the whole on-air personality community, the DJ community. Um,
So you were DJing technically, because back in those days, DJ was more associated with like the radio per se, right? Like, you know,
yeah,
like
it was a disc jockey. That's what the word. That's what DJ stands for, disc jockey. So, and
so
disc were platters, So
so you
yeah,
were doing that before you fully went into how
I
mixing,
was
period.
doing that before I even knew that there was something else. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So I didn't. I started doing. I did that when I was like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13 years old, maybe between the age
Wow.
of 11 and
You
maybe
were
14.
young.
Yeah. So when I met Steve, and he was talking about hot mixing and everything, and I was like, "Well, what is hot mixing? What is that?" And he proceeded to tell me what it was, broke it down. It's the art of blending, or the craft of blending two records together simultaneously. They did not have to be the same record. They could be two different records simultaneously with two turntables and a mixer. Oh,
Wow.
mixer. I mean, I was intrigued just then. So when he continued to tell me about it, I continued, of course, to ask more questions about it. And I asked him, and I said, "Well, where are the girls at that do this?" You know what I'm saying? Because now I am associating that with disc jockeys, on air disc jockeys. We have a deep culture in Chicago with Black radio. Um, from the Johnson Publishing um, community, Jet Magazine, Ebony, those
Mm-hmm.
magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Johnson was actually from Chicago. So
Wow.
Johnson Publishing was from Chicago. So the Jet magazines, the Essence magazines, the Ebony magazines, those were all from Chicago with
Wow.
Mr. Johnson. And then the products, they got into hair care products, the Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen, and Afro Sheen Cosmetics and stuff
That
like
was
that.
all Chicago.
All of that came from Chicago. Yeah, Mr. Johnson came
Wow.
from Chicago. He was a Chicago born and bred and one of the first black media moguls there were.
Wow.
Um, so there was a radio station called WJPC,
Mm.
Johnson Public. JPC meant Johnson Publishing Company. So
Hmm.
it was something, and then there were two women. There was one woman in specific. Her name was Mary D, and she was one of the first on air personalities too. And oh my God, I was so intrigued by Mary D. I thought that she was everything, you know. So
Mm.
I started associating what Steve was telling me about playing music in the mix format
Mm.
to being a DJ, which I never knew that we considered that to be an on-air personality, but
Mm.
being a DJ
Mm.
on them because all they really were DJs. They took on-air personalities.
I understand.
So when I asked him where the women were, he told me, well, there really aren't any.
Mm.
And I guess the myth at that time, or this was the belief of the guys that was doing it,
Mm-hmm.
was that women couldn't do it.
Mm.
We did not supposedly have the hand-eye coordination that
Mm.
it took to be able to learn how to mix.
Wow.
And but he also told me that he knew that that wasn't true. He
Oh,
knew
okay.
it
Okay.
wasn't true because he had a younger sister, and his younger sister he had taught how to mix. So he was like, so that's not true. Women can do it, you know, but then I wanted to learn. By that time, I had fully recognized that there were a lot of guys in my neighborhood that had taken to the craft as a hobby. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of those guys collectively started teaching me along with Steve, started teaching me actually how to mix, you know. So I attribute that to several different guys. Um, but eventually I fell in love with the craft. I fell in love with the craft. I was not totally sold on the music. Not the early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s. So I wasn't necessarily sold on the music. And I was very much at that time deeply immersed in the stepping culture. Because
Mm.
I was a stepper in high school. That's what I did. I mean, that was my thing. But
I was still in your heart. That stepping culture, you was like still saw yourself a part of that scene.
oh, I
Versus,
was definitely still going to steppers parties and things like
mm,
that. The thing
mm,
about the stepping culture is that a lot of people don't know is that it was competitive too, but the
mm,
competition sprung from trying to find something peaceful
mm,
that that our urban brothers and sisters could do and not have to be in the segregated gang violence that actually went on in Chicago. So everything is segregated in Chicago.
I'm glad you.
Nobody you either from the south side or from the west side, or that competitiveness is
Mm,
an absolute, it's just Chicago nature, Chicago
mm,
culture. From the side of town that you're from the neighborhoods that you came up in, from the it was like almost like a sports type of rivalry competitiveness culture from the high schools to the everything was competitive. So yes, Chicago is extremely competitive. It's inbred in us. We cannot help it. We really can't. um,
mm, mm.
doesn't make for a whole lot of kumbaya moments.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
with, with growth and maturity, those things start to come, but we're still very highly competitive in Chicago. Highly.
Mm.
Yeah. So I started learning, and that was when I met my first mentors, which would have been Andre Hatchett is his name, of the
Mm-hmm.
Chosen Few. And another brother that I kind of grew up with. He's younger than me, but his name was Keith Fobb. Is Keith Fobb. And Keith, he had equipment.
Oh.
Well, Keith's house became the end place to be. So Keith and Andre actually helped me develop my skill set, to learn how to actually, mix and blend. And
Mm.
eventually I started developing a ear for, the music. And that's also how I met Frankie.
Now,
Um,
now let me ask you this. So going back to cruise, so that's why cruise was such a big thing because not everybody had accessibility to the equipment. So like if you could get down with the crew, then you could have somebody teach you. And then once you were part of that crew, you good, you could share records. It was like a communal thing kind of.
I think for very much so, it was very communal. I mean,
Mm.
like I said, I was already 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
But a lot of the people that I played with or were playing, they were still in high school.
Hmm.
And when you're in high school, you can't afford equipment is expensive. I mean, it's expensive now, but if you think in comparison to 1981, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? A Teledyne mixer from Radio Shack, a Vestax, was that Radio Shack? Vestax or Teledyne? One of those were the
Hmm.
Radio Shack brand.
Hmm.
A Radio Shack mixer, two-channel mixer, may have been a couple of $100s, but who has a couple of $100 when, you know what I'm saying? So
Back then, that's expensive for back then, even
That's
too. A couple
that's
$100.
very expensive for back there, even
Yeah.
if it was $200, and a lot of us didn't work.
Mm.
So in high school, you might have gotten a summer job, but during the course of the year, school year, you weren't working. So and our parents, sometimes that might have been motivation for us to get good grades. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, if you get, straight A's, I'll give you the money to buy this. So
Mm.
yeah, that was crews were very much communal. That's how that came together because we all kind of shared what it was that we had and we pieced together what we needed. And yeah,
Mm.
we could come up with a setup, and everybody would go over there and practice, and we buy our records and put all our records in the same crate. And so yeah, but I think the competitiveness also came because this was kind of dance music was dance music. It wasn't called house then. Um,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
and it's kind of floating out of disco, but
Uh,
there were other types of dance music. So we're talking about some of the early phases of hip hop as well. Um, and battles, there we have battles of the DJs, like the hip hop culture probably still has very often. We
yeah.
we used to have battles of the DJs too, but and I'm talking about with the cutting, the scratching, and you know what I'm saying, the whole 9 yards, with those battles. But I think what made the difference is that dance is continuous, so the music doesn't stop. So
Mhm.
we just wanted to dance, you know what I'm saying? Or we just wanted to dance. So all that cutting and scratching and all that other type of stuff, that kind of became disruptive to people that were just there to dance.
I see.
And I think that kind of separated. That's where hip hop and what we now know as house kind of started separating. Um, House went more towards the continuous dance club culture,
Mm.
um, and was definitely brought in, fostered by um, the the LGBTQ plus community, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was picked up musically by the younger straight kids, but
Mm,
they started making their own music. They were more interested in the technical aspects of it, you know, the drum machines, the rolling 909s or the 808s, and you know, putting together small groups and making their own tracks. Um,
mm.
that's kind of what happened, and how house was actually born as a name, of a
From
genre.
Chicago. From Chicago, not New York.
I think that the culture itself,
Yeah.
um, the house culture, which
Mm-hmm.
is also a dance culture, I think that it was mimicked from the things that were going on in New York, because New York
Mm,
had a far larger you know, dance culture scene. They had the discotheques, they had the clubs, they had the stars that wanted to go to the clubs. You know, they had the Studio 54s and the Paradise Garages and things like that. And then you got to understand that Frankie Knuckles was actually born and raised in New York. Um,
it's true.
Robert Williams, who opened the warehouse, or who came into the group of people that were doing parties in Chicago, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a LGBTQ grouping of people, um,
Mm-hmm.
but they were doing parties in people's houses or in basements or wherever they could. I mean, they were very much underground because the gay community just wasn't accepted like that, and they didn't have a place to be themselves or to be free or to be safe.
Mm,
So but when Robert Williams got with this one crew of people, and I think how they met each other was that the crew of people that were throwing parties in Chicago would always go to New York once or twice a month to experience some of, you
I
know,
see.
to go to some of that club culture. So I think the club culture itself may have been mimicked from New York. Um,
Okay.
because it was far bigger, far more vibrant, and it was more of an open cultural melting pot. Where
Mm,
Chicago and its segregation and its politics and what we had going on in Chicago, it wasn't
yeah.
easy to be anything other than a straight white male. I mean, just really,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, anything outside of being a straight white male or a straight white female married to a straight white male, it was just non accepted in Chicago, which is why we were
Mm,
so segregated and still are, which is, you know,
mm,
race and classism and you know, had a lot to do with Chicago, whereas New York is a landing spot. That's where the immigrants went to. So
yeah.
that's why the boroughs have so many different cross-cultural things going on, because that's
Mm,
where people went. That's how people got into the United States.
yeah.
We're in the middle of the Midwest. We in the flatlands, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
we're not a port city like New
Mm,
York is. So
mm.
the crossing of the cultures was far easier in New
Out
York,
there than in
and the
Chicago.
acceptance of the variances of different cultures were far easier in New York than it ever has been or probably will be in Chicago. That's just historically, you know. So I think that the culture that developed, the club culture, the dance
Mhm.
culture, the underground freedom culture of dance, and
Mhm.
music, I think that we derived that from New York. But
I understand.
the labeling and the house music culture
Mm,
itself was definitely born and came from Chicago. Just,
mhm.
you know, so and I'm not trying to just be politically correct. I just think that historically, in my mind, in this day and age, um, that would be the truth of it. I'm not trying to claim anything more than what it is that I saw, that I
Mm.
experienced, that I know, and I know that I had a lot of resistance and a lot of non-acceptance as a female DJ
Mm.
in the community. And most of my acceptance did come from the LGBTQ community.
Mm.
It came from the Frankie Knuckles. It came
I
from
was
the
just about to ask. Yeah, I was
yeah.
I was just about
Was
to ask.
allowed to grow. I was allowed to thrive. I was allowed to be taught. Whereas with most of the younger straight kids and
Mm-hmm.
the other DJs, they didn't have very much acceptance for me straight out the gate.
Mm.
But I got in those battles and I was a badass. So forgive
Mm.
me for saying I could play.
Mm. Now talk to me because that perfectly ties in with you meeting Frankie Knuckles because Andre Hatchett was one of the people going to the warehouse frequently, right?
Hmm.
Because that was for mostly, you know what I'm saying, queer men, and that was that space that, was the warehouse. It was mostly for queer men, mostly queer black men, and he was a
Hmm.
frequent patron. But I remember you saying in an interview that by the time you met that you only went to the warehouse a few times, like 3 or 4 times, because it was like towards the end of it. Because people think the warehouse, lasted like throughout the 80s, but like it was over like the very beginning of the 80s, like 81 it closed, right?
I want to say that maybe 81, somewhere between 81 and 83.
Mm,
Um, I think where a lot of people in Chicago get that confused with is because there was a second club called the Warehouse
I see.
that opened in the mid 80s or mid to late 80s.
Uh,
So
okay.
there when people say the Warehouse, you have kids that might be 5 or 6 years younger than I am right now, right?
Mm,
They're 5 or 6 years younger. They can now get into drinking establishments. So that
uh,
second warehouse was actually a bar and a club.
mm,
The original warehouse was not a bar. It was
mm,
a juice bar. It was a juice bar. They didn't serve alcohol in there. There was no alcohol sales in the warehouse, the original warehouse. There was
mm.
no alcohol sales in the music box.
Wow.
And most of the places where the younger kids went to, there were no alcohol sales in there because they was too young to drink. So
Mm,
you may have heard of other places called Sawyer's, the candy store, the playground, um, Mendel. Mendel was a freaking uh, Catholic high school. You know what I'm saying? So, and most of those kids, they were under the age of 18. So
mm,
they had curfews. Their parents was dropping them off and picking them up. You know what I'm saying? So, no, there was no alcohol. Alcohol sales did not drive the community at all because
mm.
nobody really was old enough to drink. And the warehouse and the music box, they didn't sell alcohol in either one of those places because in Chicago, you'd have to have an alcohol license. And
Mm.
that was a sure way to get yourself shut down by having alcohol and not being licensed because Chicago gonna dip their hands in some type of profit, some type of way. So they were underground parties. They didn't sell alcohol. They were juice bars.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so glad you said that because, I feel like, you know, a lot of people associate like the music, like partying, like, oh, we drinking, we da da da. But like a lot of what you're saying is essentially a lot of people who were there wanted to be there because of the music, because of the
They were there
ambiance,
for the
because of
music.
the vibe. It wasn't driven by,
It was not
like
driven by no.
drinking culture or anything like that.
It was not driven by alcohol sales or a bar culture at all.
Wow.
Um, I think that it started becoming more of a bar culture because we also had something else that happened in Chicago. There's a law called rave laws. Um,
Mm.
so um, And that really sprung from them not wanting these little white kids from the suburbs coming to the cities getting turned out on these damn rave parties because they go back out to the suburbs. Out in the suburbs, little white kids, they get their cars at 16 and they drive into the city and, I'm going out,
Mhm.
mom, and all this other type of stuff. And and they were going to these secret parties, these rave parties. They were held in warehouses at secret locations
Mm.
and those kids they were finding out were coming back home and they were finding them addicted to drugs. They were finding them addicted to heroin. They were finding them, they were doing all types of psychotropic drugs and heroin and cocaine. And I mean, there was a lot of drug use that came with the club cultures, I'm going to say all of the club cultures, because
I'm so glad you said.
there was no alcohol sales. So drugs was it. You know what I'm saying? So them kids, them parents didn't know that their kids was coming back and that they were heroin addicts and all this other stuff until a lot of the times it was too late. And I think what happened was I remember a time that our mayor at the time, Richard Daley, had a
Mm-hmm.
nephew. Um, I think the nephew POD. And we're talking about our first family. Daley was the mayor of Chicago. Papa Daley was the mayor of Chicago for well over 40 years. So we're talking about in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then his son became mayor of Chicago, and he was the mayor of Chicago for over 20 years. So we're talking about the family,
Wow.
like the Daley
He was
family.
the mayor for a long, they had a
He
dynasty.
was the mayor for a long time.
Wow.
And he was one of the biggest racist bigots, and it was bad in Chicago.
Wow.
Um, and one of the sons of a son of a daughter, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
he OD'd.
Mm-mm-mm.
And then they started, the surrounding suburban areas. There was an epidemic. There was an epidemic of white kids being turned out on street drugs.
Wow.
So they came down with the rave laws. And the rave laws was supposedly to stop rave parties. So these
Mm.
kids would stop coming into the city, be attracted to the city. But it covered so much more. And when the rave law came down, it covered juice bars.
So that was the law that was passed in 87 that made the music box close. I see. Okay, okay. That wasn't just juice bars. That hit everything. So that
You couldn't rent a warehouse anymore and have a party there once a month or just an old space. And then they started rezoning everything. You know what I'm saying? Because we had a lot of warehouses, we had a lot of stockyards. Chicago was the stockyard place. That's where all the trains with the stock and stuff would cross through Chicago. That was our melting pot gate as
mm,
opposed, you know what I'm saying? So in order to get stuff from New York to California, you had to go through the Midwest,
mm,
So we had a lot of vacant, non-usable spaces
mm,
um, in the South Loop area and various different places all around that you could just, the warehouses are sitting there. This space is just sitting there. So if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to rent this space out,"
mm.
and how much would it cost? And then they would build something, turn it into a dance space. It was
Yeah.
the way it wasn't in residential areas.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can go and you play your music as loud as you want to. You're not serving any alcohol, just so long as you're meeting fire codes or whatever. And even that got thrown out the window after a while. I don't know if you're familiar with the E2 situation that happened here in Chicago. Um,
Mm.
it's
What's
been
that?
it's been about E2 was a club That was another club before that, was another club before that, that was another club before that, that I actually was a resident DJ in back in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, and then again in the 90s when they changed their name. But by time this happened, and I think it just passed 20 years, the same place owned by the same person that kept changing the club was dangerous, and there was a second floor,
Mm,
and on New Year's Eve, it was packed, full of kids,
mhm.
and there was only one real exit, and it was a very steep and thin stairwell, and somebody set off some fireworks at the New Year's Eve party,
Come on.
and people panicked and started trying to rush down this stairwell, and they got crushed. I mean, literally, it was horrible. It was called E. The name of the club at that time was called E2. So if you look that up, that's a whole
Wow.
nother law that we have right now too. So we don't have any more E2 situations because the building from the very beginning never passed code to be an actual club. They kept shutting it down all the time. Same owner. It was called La Mirage when I was playing there when they first opened
La
it.
Mirage. So that was La Mirage.
La Mirage,
Wow.
Heroes. It was also called Heroes, which was a sports bar after La Mirage. Then it was called, I think it was Chic, Club Chic or something like that. And then when he opened it up that last time, so it was like four or five different names, but it was all owned by the same guy. His name was Calvin Hollins. And before all of that, it was
Mhm.
a Ford dealership. It was a Ford dealership, and it had multiple floors. The second floor, right, was the showroom floor. And they literally had an elevator lift on the outside of it where they would lift the cars up in them and bring them to the floor. And that's where the showroom floor was. But they had to shut it down because it became unstable. And they told them they could no longer. So the dealership moved out.
Mhm.
And eventually, La Mirage.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
It's so funny because you're putting like you're putting like the picture to all these different names because there's, this book I got called Beyond Heaven, and it has like all the flyers from back in the day, and I see certain clubs like hmm,
From. I would love to see that book. Where'd you get
called,
that from?
it's called Beyond Heaven, and it was
Okay.
put out. It's three parts. The first volume is sold out, but there's a volume two and a volume three, and they're really dope. There's this guy. His name is Mario Mixon Luna, and
Before. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
And
Beyond
these
Heaven?
yeah, Beyond Heaven, and it has all the different flyers from back in the day. Stuff, it got Ron Hardy flyers. It got stuff with Steve Silk Hurley. It might be something with you in it too. Now I'm trying to think about it. Yeah, it's just so crazy. I just flipped on the page that says La Mirage. Look at that.
That La Mirage. So that
Yep.
became E2.
Wow. Yeah, 2347 South Michigan Avenue.
Yep. The building's not there anymore. They finally tore it down. They finally tore it down. It's a parking garage. It's a outdoor parking garage. Who is Beyond Heaven written by?
So it's not so it's just the flyers, but it's Mario Mixon Luna, I think his name is. Let me double check for you. Mario Live It Up Luna, my bad. Mario Live It Up.
Live it up. Okay, no, I have never heard of.
Yeah, yeah, Live It Up without an E. So Live It Up Luna. And I'll send you his Instagram too. He'll
Okay.
yeah, I'll send you his Instagram. So this is so, you know, wow. Just all the details that you have, you know what I'm saying, is so crazy because, you're bringing these stories to life right now. I'm so used to reading this stuff or seeing it, online, but you speaking about it is different level. And I don't think you've talked about this in your other interviews too. You haven't, gotten this deep in your other interviews when it comes to some of the stuff you're saying.
Yeah. They don't. I've been blessed over the last 5 or 6 years, and I've actually had a few interviews and had some opportunities to be in a couple of documentaries and figureheads in the storyline with
Yeah.
being at the Chicago Story documentary, House Music, Cultural Revolution that came out on WTTW, which
Hmm.
is our public broadcasting system. They won an Emmy. Amazing. And
Did you get
then,
one?
huh?
Did you get one? Did they give you one?
I did not. I was a figurehead. I was not an executive producer. I wasn't involved with actually putting it together, but a
Okay.
wonderful, wonderful woman by the name of Barbara Allen put that together.
Mm.
And some very, in fact, Laura Branch, who
Lori Branch.
actually
Yeah.
is the first female DJ, mixing DJ.
Hmm.
She was one of the contributors, executive producers, or something to that arena. Lori Branch, I don't know if she got an actual Emmy though. I know Frederick did. Frederick Dunson.
Hmm.
Frederick was Frankie's business partner, and Frederick is actually
Mm.
who now runs the Frankie Knuckles Foundation,
Ah,
and that's who Frankie left all of his intellectual property and every of his likeness and everything to Frederick to manage.
wow.
So he was an executive producer, and I think he got an Emmy. But yeah, that ended up being an Emmy winning documentary, and then Vince Lawrence.
Vince
Vince
Lawrence.
Lawrence, his story.
Mm.
Um, oh God, he would kill me. What is the name of this movie? It's been doing it for the last year and a half or so. It's been in a lot of the film
It's,
festivals.
it's been doing
Move
a
Your,
lot of screenings.
Move Your Body.
Movie about, yup. I heard
Move
about that.
Your
Yup. It's
Body.
been doing a lot of
So
screenings.
I
But
was a figurehead in that as well. Me and Lori both in both of them. I was actually at Tribeca
you,
last year.
oh, Tribeca Film Festival.
It made it to the Tribeca Film Festival, and myself, Lori Branch,
Wow.
and Lady D
Lady D.
all um,
Wow.
all played at the Tribeca Film Festival after the showing of it. So
That's
that was
so
pretty
dope.
cool. So, and I've been in a couple of books, but for the most part, I think prior to that, I don't know if there was no interest
Mm.
or people just didn't want to hear my take on things because all of it is not pretty. And Celeste talked too goddamn much.
Listen. I'm a talker. So I love people that, you know what I'm saying, talk just as much as me. Now, one thing that you said that stuck out to me was the different cultures, because there were different dance cultures, there was different house cultures within just the city alone, correct? It wasn't just one scene, it was a bunch of scenes popping off.
It was a lot of moving parts at the same time. It was an explosion.
Like there
Um,
was some people you didn't even know, oh, damn, they do house too. Like it was like that. Like so many
yeah,
people, like not even everybody knows each other type of situation.
yeah, and then I mean, and the cultures crossed,
Mm,
but um, they didn't. They were still extremely segregated
yeah,
because I mean, in the early '80s, there was a lot going on in the '80s. You know what I'm saying? The HIV epidemic,
right.
epidemic. When
Y'all
that
still got
started,
y'all still got the gangs. Y'all still and
we still have the gang cultures here, in Chicago. We had the projects. You know what I'm saying? Now most of our projects have been torn down.
hmm.
Projects ran for 40 blocks down a major street called State Street in Chicago, which is a dividing line between the west side and the east side, was
Wow.
State Street. So there were 40 blocks of projects, high rises, low rise, 40 blocks from 21st Street all the way to 59th Street.
That's insane.
Down State Street was all projects. Those are gone now.
That's insane.
They're
So
gone now.
it was literally like the black folks in the city was literally just kept in one in certain areas, not one area, because it was a lot of black folks on the south side, a lot of black folks on the west side, but they
Right, and that's just the South Side projects. That ain't even including the West Side projects. That's just
oh
the
wow, that was just the south. Wow.
Yeah, that was just the South Side project, and it wasn't the far South Side projects because there were projects in the far South Side as well. So
Mhm.
that just covered the South Side of Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but all of them are gone now.
Yeah.
It's funny, all of them were built by Daley.
Of course they were. But you grew up in a different part of Chicago. You grew up on the south side, but you grew up in Hyde Park. You grew up in more diverse area. And
More diverse area. Yeah, Hyde Park is actually the neighborhood that the University of Chicago campus is on.
mm,
So it was far more diverse.
mhm,
There was far more tolerance for interracial marriages. So I'm
mm,
63 years old now, right? So I was born in 1962. So I remember the the civil rights. I remember
wow.
there's a lot of stuff that I remember. I was a small child, but I remember these things like pretty vividly. Not only that, but I'm an only child.
Mm.
So my recall is really, really grabby
You
because
you got the memory of an elephant, like,
and sometimes the memory of a frog. It depends.
but to go
Yeah.
back to what you were saying though, because you were saying some of the history isn't pretty.
A lot
Now,
of the history is not pretty. I'm not even I'm just with the city of Chicago alone by itself is not pretty, but the what I experienced trying to make my way as a DJ. By the time I had just really, really fallen in love with the club culture and the music and the craft of it and the competitiveness of it.
mm,
And it was pretty unique being one of a few females.
mhm,
Um, yeah. So by then I was just totally ingrained in the culture of the whole thing. It was my lifestyle. It was my way of living. Um,
mm,
but no, I was born and raised in Hyde Park, which was a very, very diverse, culturally diverse neighborhood. It still is. It was one of the few neighborhoods where um, interracial marriages or interracial unions were kind of left alone at. They didn't mess with them there because we still have sundown towns in Chicago. Are you familiar with what?
in Chicago, in the city?
Yeah. Now they may have people of color living in these areas now, of different cultures living in these areas now, but I don't trust it. Um,
Uh,
Still some very deep undertones of racism and don't get caught after dark in that area by yourself. There's
still
still
to
a
this
lot of
day.
that to this day. To
Wow,
this to
wow.
this day. And I think that Vince's movie, which was basically about his plight, his life, and how he got drawn into making music and becoming who he is as far as one of the pioneers with house music itself and what he had to go through just trying to earn enough money for him to get his first keyboard that he saw in a pawn shop. He worked at White Sox Park.
So he saw that whole thing go down with
He
the
was
disco
working
demolition.
the night. He was working that night.
Jesus.
Didn't have a clue of what it was. The movie is good. The movie is good. I don't even know how I got to be a figurehead. I remember interviewing for, but how they were able to interweave me in that movie when, yeah, I know Vince and I've known Vince for a long time, but we didn't get down like that. You know what I'm saying? I went to school with Jesse.
Mm,
Oh, Vince. I went to school with Jesse Saunders.
I see. I see. So
Me
they
and
went
Jesse,
to high schools.
yeah, me and Jesse went to high school, same graduating class. So I knew Jesse, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't really know Vince back then until they started making records and had their group and everything. And to be honest with you, I probably wasn't really that into the music that they were making because my musical palette had developed by then.
Yeah.
So I I, I did like some of the earlier house music tracks that came out.
Like what? Your
Um,
love?
yeah, I was a big Jamie fan, Jamie Principle. Your
Shout out
love
to
blew
Prince.
my mind. Um, 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 Robert Owens. Oh my God,
Oh
I was
yeah,
the
Robert
biggest
Owens. Yeah.
Robert Owens fan. Yes. Him and that group.
Fingers Inc.
Yeah.
All the
Fingers
way.
Inc. was for me, Fingers Inc. was the shit. You know what I'm saying?
Uh,
So I wasn't really as much into the other stuff. It happened. I remember playing it. I remember being able to get into it so much. Um, I've known Chip E for a long time.
yeah.
Um, so when we were all jacking, as we called it, to its house, and when Steve developed and came out with a lot of people think that his first it was I Can't Turn Around. It was the old Isaac Hayes song.
Yep.
And he came out with his version of it, and then Farley jacked it, and then Farley came out with his version of it. I mean, it was so much competitiveness going out. But I literally remember Steve making up his own words to I Can't Turn Around, sitting in sitting in like the lunchroom at school and him just making up his own words and using the music from I Can't Turn Around, Isaac Hayes, I Can't Turn Around. I can remember him making up his own words. I remember
Like
him
weird,
doing
like
to,
Weird Al Yankovic style.
yeah.
That's
Um,
so funny.
he did it with Steve was hilarious. He did a song. I don't think he ever put this out, but he would just sit up and just off the top of his head just start, singing. And it was a Prince song. Remember Prince Controversy?
Yeah, controversy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Steve had his own version and it was called Contraceptives. I wonder if he remembers that. Oh my God. That is fucking hilarious. Um, Contraceptives.
That's hilarious. That is so funny. Oh my
Oh,
God.
wonder if he remembers that. I might have to ask him, does he remember that? Because I do. I
He gonna
remember that.
remember it now because I'm gonna make a clip of this. This is funny. This is funny. So basically, from what you're saying and what you're telling me, there were different, and I don't think people emphasize this enough. There were different styles of house music being made because it was still very experimental. And like I have this clip in this documentary, and it's Joey Beltram. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he's a New York techno producer. But anyway, he was saying like the reason he fell in love with house was because it could be something with an 808. It could be something with, vocals and a, soft groove. It could be something with the pianos, with the keys and the chords in it. It could be, just so many different things could be house back in those days. You know
I,
what I'm
I, I think that house just became all encompassing
saying?
because I mean, yeah, I remember going to the power plant and the music box and the couple of times I was afforded the ability to go to the warehouse. Be honest with you, the first time I went to the warehouse, I didn't want to go back. It scared the fuck out of me. Um, it was a lot of things that I had never seen before. It was a lot of things that I had never experienced before. It
Mm,
was in a culture that I was not immersed in. I'm a heterosexual female.
mm,
So,
mm,
being in um the gay community,
mhm,
mostly males, in the gay male community in their safe space where they could just let their hair down and be who they were,
mm.
and actually putting together the pieces of some of the people that I may have grown up with, went to school with,
Uh,
um, that
uh,
were a little bit older than me. They were in there, you know what I'm saying? Finding out that, you know, damn, she's gay? Oh, I never knew he was gay. I mean, just, it was a way of discovery
yeah,
that was a lot for me.
with a lot to
I
take
had
in, a
not
lot to
been
process.
immersed in that culture like that, you know. So it was a lot for me because I'm the only child from Hyde Park, and you know what I'm saying? So I didn't get exposed to a whole lot of things of
Mm,
the world. The
mm,
world was my community coming up. So
I
I
see.
had Hyde Park. It wasn't until I got into high school that I start venturing out and getting outside of the neighborhood. I
Well,
had boundaries.
let me ask you this. Did you even realize like how segregated and racist the city was growing like once like when you were a child, like until like you grew up in Hyde Park, like started going to other places and like really experiencing things like were you like, damn, like this city is messed up.
I did, but not to the extent that it was, but I was very aware.
Okay.
Um, I had very pro-black parents,
Mm,
um, and their surroundings and their friends and their culture within itself. They
yeah.
were very, very pro-black. Most of
They,
my mother's friends
the
changed their
Panthers?
names in the 70s, and I wore an afro at 5 years old,
Mm,
you
mm.
know,
Was,
and I
was your
chic me.
family involved in the Panthers? Were they down with them?
They very much were.
Mm.
I remember when they started the free lunch programs. The free.
Wow.
I remember that between that
Wow.
and Operation Push was in my neighborhood too, so I could walk to Operation Push. So when we had the school strikes, we went to Operation Push. When the school we had a real long school strike,
Mm.
and we went to Operation Push, and the Panthers would come and feed us. And so I lived down the street from Muhammad Ali. I lived down the street from Elijah Muhammad. I lived in a neighborhood where Operation Push actually is. So all of those things were in walking distance for me. So I was very aware of the racism, but I was also immersed in the blackness of us during
Mm.
the 70s too. So,
Mm.
I was aware.
Sense of pride, right? So you had that black pride in you. So you wasn't
it
even
was, it
really.
was ingrained in me because that's how our communities, the black parts of our communities, that's how our parents clung to each other.
Mm.
And so yes, I remember the Panthers. My dad used to throw these parties, and I'm talking about weekend parties. Lord have mercy. Um, these parties, and I remember meeting people like Bobby Humphrey and Eldridge Cleaver, and I remember meeting Angela Davis. I remember these people that were a part of um, Oscar Brown Jr. He had a band back in the 70s, late 70s, late 60s into the 70s, and they would rehearse in my building, which means that I was able to meet Gil Scott Heron. Oscar Brown Jr. is a very strong figurehead in black pro-black music for back in the days. So I remember those things. So yeah, I was very aware. Um, I did not I didn't understand it,
Mm.
but I was definitely aware.
But you hadn't experienced it directly like as you would when you started going out into the city and really seeing everything else outside of.
I did, but I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of incidents with the police as a 11 year old. And they thought I was a little black boy because I didn't have any hair. I had a real short afro
Mm.
and had not developed in any way, shape, or form. And I was very tomboyish.
Mm.
And yeah, I had an experience where I was abused by the police once before. They thought I was a little black boy. They didn't know that I was a black girl until the two girls that were with me, which were I call them my nieces. They were a few years younger than me, and we were coming from the museum. I lived where the Museum of Science and Industry was. We could walk to that. That was like a playground for us. So
Wow.
we were coming back, and we were throwing crab apples at each other. You know how crab apple fights.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I guess some of the crab apples hit a car that was going past, and it was a detective. It was a white detective, and I don't even know where he came from. We just having crab apple fights on our way home, and this white man ran up on me, parked his car, jumped out of it, ran up on me, grabbed me, slammed me up against the car, and had my arm all back and everything. He dislocated my shoulder, and I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why it was happening. And I just remember them screaming and crying, let her go, let her go. And finally, he must have heard them say her. And they were like, yeah, let her go. And that's when he looked at me and he was like, oh my God, you're a girl. And he just kind of, go home. And then he got in his car and he sped off. And it was this little Jewish lady and her son that saw the whole thing. And she came over there and made sure I was all right. And they walked me all the way home. And I lived about 2 miles away from the museum, walked me all the way home and, told my parents what happened. Um, and then my uncle and all his pro-black baby, they went down to the police station. They acted a fool down there, and I had to go to the hospital. My shoulder was dislocated, but I had no idea that this was out and out segregated bullying and racism. I have no idea that that's what that was. I was 10. I was 11 for God's sake. I didn't know that's what that was. I was in my neighborhood. I was, doing what kids do. I wasn't So I didn't know. I
Mm.
had an idea, but it wasn't until much later on in life when I did start branching out and seeing things and, you know, got my summer jobs and started watching the news. My father started insisting on me making sure that I read the newspaper every day or that I watched the news or, he started insisting on those things to keep me aware. But I did not know at that time that's what I was experiencing and why I was experiencing it. I had no idea. No,
Damn.
you know.
Wow. And so so you were alive around the time Fred Hampton got killed, got murdered.
Yeah,
Wow. Was it
yeah.
like, do you feel like the Black Power movement took a real blow in the city after that?
I don't think it took I think that it ignited more because of the outrage.
Mm.
People were incensed. And Fred Hampton, I mean, you got to think when he got killed, it wasn't too long after King got killed. It wasn't too long after Malcolm got killed. It wasn't, with us having Elijah Muhammad living on our literally down the street and around. Elijah Muhammad lived 4 blocks from me.
Mm.
Muhammad Ali's house was right around the corner from that. So I lived 4 or 5 blocks from Muhammad Ali during the time that Cassius Clay was becoming Muhammad Ali. You know what I'm saying? And Elijah Muhammad's house was right around the corner. So I remember these things vividly because a lot of this stuff happened right at my home, right at my front door, like right there in Hyde Park. A lot of people don't know that. Farrakhan still lives there.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah,
so,
Farrakhan still lives there. They
so
still have
let,
the property.
so let me ask you this. So back to that first time you went to the warehouse, you weren't really feeling it. You was
I
like,
was
I
I
ain't,
was not really feeling it. It was foreign to me. It the one thing that I can tell you that there were two things that made it enjoyable for me. One was the music
mm-hmm,
and recognizing the liberation that was happening within the music. So there was
mm,
no judgment.
mm,
So that was freedom.
mm,
Um, so the music and the sound system was that alone was enough to keep me there.
mm.
Um,
And the sound system was like what? Because when I talked to Louis Gomez, he used to go by Jose, but um he was mentioning that it sounded like thunder almost like
sounded like thunder. Man, listen. And the funny thing about it is that the warehouse was very close to the Chicago to Union Station, uh,
mm,
train station.
I
And
see.
Frankie used to do this thing, the lighting system, because the room was totally, totally dark, but the lighting system was amazing. And there was this big giant yellow and a big giant white spotlight like thing. And if they hit it, it would brighten up the room. Just poof. And the second thing that kept me there was I was high as hell. It may have been the first time that I tried a psychedelic.
I see.
So
It was in the punch.
no, I took some acid. I took some acid. I tried some acid for the first time. Now I was already getting high. I've been smoking weed since I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
That was culturally accepted in my household and with my parents and their friends. I'm a recovering addict. My father
Me
was an
too.
addict. My
Mm,
father was an addict. And smoking weed and certain things were just
mm,
done with the adults. So
yeah.
it was a part of the social cultural structure of what was going on where I was raised at,
Mm,
how in the environment that I was raised in. So I
mm,
had been smoking weed, and maybe had experimented with this here and there. Mind you, I'm about 18, 19 years old, so I'm figuring I can do some shit now. I might not be able to drink legally, but I could try. What is that that's going up your nose? I could try a few things, right?
mm.
So I was high, and Frankie was playing Billy Who.
Billy who?
The name of the song is called Billy Who. Who is
Billy.
that guy? Billy Who. Doom, 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 doom. That guy. Hey, that's my soul on fire. Billy Who was dope as fuck. That's a cold ass song. In fact, I'm gonna have to pull it out because I'm gonna have to play it now. Um,
I gotta play it too. But go
so
ahead.
there's a part in it, and it was mostly music. It was
Hmm.
very melodic, real sexy, kind of low sleaze to it too.
Hmm.
And there's a part in it where the trumpets are playing and the trumpets go bum, ba-dum. And at that specific moment,
Hmm.
whoever was working the lights for Frankie put on that fucking spotlight, right? Flash
Hmm.
that spotlight to the actual horns playing. And
Mm.
then he started playing the train. I'm sure you heard him play the train before, right? He
Hmm.
started playing the train. I am in the midst of an acid trip and a fucking half. Them lights came on, and baby, I thought the train was coming from Union Station straight through the motherfucking middle of the warehouse. I freaked out when I saw the light, and all I could think was, get your ass off the track. This train is going to hit you. I jumped across the room and I'm trying to jump off the tracks. I don't want to get hit by the train. Baby, after I made that dive, and all it was like, you better work. Nobody was like, what's wrong with her? I mean, it was like, hey, you getting it down like everybody else right now, right? Nothing's off limits, right? I was tripping. I mean, I'm talking about I was tripping. And once I finally got off the tracks and everybody's still screaming and losing their minds and everything, and I'm sitting there on the floor and I'm going, oh God, I got to go home. It's time to go. I don't know what's happening now. I'm like, where am I? What is going on? And I remember telling Andre, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. He was like, bitch, the party is just really getting off the ground. I was like, that's okay. I don't want to go off the ground no more. I need to go. I need to leave. Um, I had a car. I was driving then. I had my own car and I ended up leaving. Andre was like, well, I ain't leave. I was like, I got to go home. I need to go home. Um, so that was another thing that kind of, I was like, okay, I don't want to experience that anymore. It was just so much going on. It was a lot going on,
Mm,
but it was so good. It was,
music.
it was just so good. I
Mhm.
don't think I had ever felt music like that before.
Wow.
I think that was the first time I ever just really felt the music. I was immersed in it. It was like I was in the middle of the music. It was an experience that I never had before. So there was a lot of things going on, and sometimes too much newness at one time can be a scary thing.
It can be a lot, yeah.
Was too much. It was
Yeah.
too much. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't
Yeah.
prepared for it. And
Yeah.
once I had experienced it, and I can look at it both ways, yeah, it may have been too much for me, naive me at that time.
Yeah.
But when I look at it in hindsight and just close my eyes and remember the experience, just how I felt, it was probably one of the biggest points of
Mm.
of feeling music that might have been the precipice of me saying, I got to feel this some more. Now, mind you, I said I'm a recovering addict. I'm an addict. So
Mm.
I'm going to always want more. But I did not necessarily gel with the environment. It was too
Mm.
much going on.
Mm.
And I couldn't get comfortable to be totally free in the warehouse. So I only went a few times.
Mm.
It was totally different by the time the power plant opened and the music box opened. Oh shit,
Yeah.
I got my life up in there. I
Now,
got my whole life.
now tell us exactly, like, tell us, that moment you first stepped into the music box and met Ron Hardy and how that whole, introduction happened. Like, you were one of the very few people who didn't just know Ron as a DJ, but knew him as a like person. Like, this is
I knew Ronnie as a person. I was closer to Frankie than I was to Ronnie.
I see.
Um, and the music box, the original music box, which was Robert's Next Club with
Yup.
Ronnie, they also had two locations. So a
Mm.
lot of people talk about the music box, they talk about the underground. They talk about the one was on Lower Wacker. Actually, that was one of my least favorite places for the music box. Their
Really?
first location was on 14th in Indiana, and it was the old yellow cab company uh, garage type of situation. That
Mm-hmm.
was my shit. That was
Mm.
the place. I loved that place. When they moved underground, they actually took over a location that was the Ritz 2 underground, that was operated and run by Craig Cannon. And I was actually one of the residents there. And then the music box moved down there. and maybe for the first 6 months that they were down there, I would go. But after that first couple of months, I would go, but I would not stay inside very often. It was one of my, I didn't like it. It was entirely too, it was too grimy. It was just too,
Mm.
I just didn't, it felt to me, it just felt very, very grimy. I didn't like it.
I mean, as far as what, like, it was just
It
real.
was just, it was just low sleeves. It was just anything goes, and
I
it was
see.
it was underground, and
People
yeah, it was
getting wild.
it was wild. It was really, really wild. It was really, really wild. Um, the power plant, on the other hand,
Mhm.
was my favorite place to be. But the power plant was on one night and the music box was on the other. Power plant was a Tuesday, Friday. The music box was Wednesday, Saturday.
So tell
Yeah.
us about that first location at the Music Box, like what made it so special for you.
The music was amazing. And it didn't feel so closed in. It didn't feel the underground spot. It didn't have any air. There were no windows. It was underground, lower
I
Wacker underneath Michigan Avenue. It was just too closed in, no ventilation. It was just really, and then when it got hot, it got hot. It was
people
just,
smoking down there, and
yeah, we could still smoke indoors back there, all that stuff. So
it was just too.
it was too much for me. The music box, the original location, though, it was a lot more space. There were You could see the light coming through because the top of it was plexiglass or glass, so you can literally see when the sun came up or when daylight started. It was far more space, so it was far more spacious. So if I didn't want to be on the dance floor, there was a room where you can go and sit down and smoke and chill out at. There was, a whole nice large area where the juice bar was and the fruit was and all of that other. So it was just more space. I guess I'm a bit claustrophobic,
Mm,
and I do have panic and anxiety disorders.
mm,
So I needed to
and
fill the
room.
space. It still bothers me in some instances at time when I feel too closed in.
Mm,
So yeah, I preferred the music box on 14th Street more. The sound system was better. I think for me that was when Ronnie was probably at his best. And
mm,
I'd be
mm,
saying that because that was actually when I started to develop just a friendship and noticing Ronnie as a DJ because I didn't know him before that. And being able to just let it all go and let Ronnie do what he do and leave it all on the dance floor and have that freedom. Ronnie did have the ability to do that, but Ronnie's style of playing was far more manic and pitched up and um, raw
mm.
than than Frankie was as a DJ. Frankie was very polished. They were two different styles and classes of the way that they played.
I see.
Ronnie, yeah, Frankie was far
Mm,
more polished, far more meticulous. Um, and the way Frankie cared for and about the presentation of the music was totally different than Ronnie. Ronnie was a wild child. Ronnie was a wild child. He ain't get no.
he just
Bitch,
played.
I'm getting ready to play some music. Here, take this. I mean, Ronnie was a wild child. Frankie was far more collected and far more structured in his mind, with the way he presented music compared to Ronnie.
Mm.
So they were two totally different things. Um,
Where do you think, you
my,
know,
if I allowed myself
yeah,
to just let go and it didn't give me, it wasn't too much to actually get to the point where my ears were hurting or I had done too much, then Ronnie was fine.
mm,
But Frankie was always a little more polished in his presentation. And I think I took that from Frankie.
I see. So you feel like you were more influenced by Frankie's style of DJing more than Ron's style of DJing?
I think that I was, yeah.
Mm,
I think I was far more influenced by Frankie. Frankie developed my ear and my sensibility about music and presentation.
mhm,
Where Ronnie Ronnie just let it all go like
mm,
that. It didn't seem like, I'm not going to say that it didn't matter, but it didn't seem like it mattered as much to Ronnie as it did to Frankie.
mm. What do you think like Ron Hardy's strengths were? Like when it came to like DJing like that? Maybe, if Frankie was cleaner, what was Ron's like, thing that he was like a little bit better at?
Um, Ronnie was real good at energy, just
Mm,
energy that was way over the top. It was just like I said, Ronnie was a lot more manic in the way that he played. So it was just kind of, but it didn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Um, Ronnie was real good at setting a pitch fever type of wildness
mm,
um, that made people just lose their fucking minds. Where Frankie seems to have been one that was a little more intentional and he
mm.
kind of orchestrated
He was a
mine.
little more meticulous with it. A little bit.
Yeah.
Derek May said like, in the interview that it was almost like voodoo when, like voodoo
When
music.
Ronnie played,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because
I, I, I can relate to that.
because I'm listening to recordings and I put it in one of the videos I did with Louis and I'm hear people screaming his name, like shrieking it, over the music because, they so into it. Now, like the question I have is, do you feel like Chicago DJs, especially like when it got faster, like ghetto house, juking, all that like culture, the footwork culture is like a direct descendant of Ron Hardy style?
You know what? That's very interesting. I never thought of that, but I would have to say that yeah, jukin and the juke culture and the kind of wildness that was
Mm-hmm.
entertainment was a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
um I think so. And Ronnie pitched up his music very, very high. Like
Yeah.
Ronnie pitched up his music sometimes far higher than the turntable, even with a pitch control on it, would allow you to. Because Ronnie played a whole lot of reel to reels. And when you have those reel to reels, you could capitulate from you could take a 110 and turn it into a 135 when you're on a reel to reel. We can't do that on a turntable, right? And Ronnie leaned towards that 135 a lot more. You know, he played his music very, very fast. I don't
135 he was playing it at?
I don't know if it was 135. I mean, we
But
listened
closer
to
but closer
music,
to that though.
but yeah, he played a lot faster than Frankie did. Frankie had
Wow.
a tendency to pitch down a little bit more.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
I can honestly say that. So like if you listen to Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Two Tribes. Have
Yeah.
you ever heard that at its original pitch?
Mm-mm.
Two Tribes at its original pitch has got to be about 129, 130.
Wow.
But Frankie would pitch it down.
Mm.
And it was a lot, and it ended up being a whole different type of palatability to it. Whereas
Mm.
Ronnie would play it at that 130 or pitch it up to 140 shit. If he was high enough, it did really depend. You know what I'm saying? So Ronnie was really a wild child. Frankie was not as wild like that when it came to music presentation,
Mm.
um, to keep a room going.
This is
Yeah,
crazy. This
yeah.
is
Ronnie was more like a voodoo dance.
wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
so you said you mentioned something in there when you were talking about, you know, being at his best. What do you mean? Do you feel like his like performances and his like DJing skills like kind of, faltered as time went on because of his addiction? Mm,
Probably so.
damn.
Probably so. I don't really like to I don't really like to harp on it, but I know for a fact that a lot of the things, and this is me speaking as a recovering addict, knowing who I am as an addict. You know what I'm saying? I think that when you're practicing, you don't have as many boundaries,
Mm,
or you don't recognize boundaries. It's
mm,
anything goes kind of when you're practicing.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So I really don't like to harp on it because I think that Ronnie gets a bad rap because of that. You know
Mm,
what I'm saying? And and I think that people also aren't truthful about themselves when they were in those clubs under whatever influences that they were underneath. You know what I'm saying? Oh, it was them doing it. I wasn't doing it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
No,
They was doing.
we was high as hell. What you say? We was high as hell. We was fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not to say that I wasn't high as hell in the power plant neither. I
Mm,
was getting high. I was fucked up. I was getting high in the music box. I was getting high in the power plant. I was getting high wherever the fuck I was. I'm an addict. That's what I was doing. I
yeah.
was using. You know what I'm saying? So that's just me being realistic with me, but also putting into perspective what my mentality had to have been and what my tolerances were. Or, you know what I'm saying? Because I knew that I was under the influence of something other than the music. The music accentuated, or the high accentuated the music. So I can't put it into a super full comparison because I wasn't right. I was
Mm,
under the influence of something, you know what I'm saying? But what was more comfortable for me as far as being able to enjoy the full experience, I'm talking about the high with the music, with the environment, with the party, with the whole night of what was going on. My most comfortable times and my best experiences of a combined frequencies, or, you know, for me, the power plant.